This video is now in session, and there are some worrying signs about Biden's approval numbers and what that means come 2022. So Biden currently, his approval rating on average is 48.5%, and his disapproval rating is 45.9%. That is a dramatic fall from the last time we talked about his approval ratings, which was around here, where he had around 52.7% in terms of an approval rating and a 42.7% disapproval rating. And that is incredibly bad for Biden. It's incredibly bad for the Democrats in 2022, and it could signal a rougher time for Biden later in his presidency, later in his first term as president. And the reason why the poll numbers have gone so down is because of two main factors. First of all, Afghanistan is taken over the news still. The withdrawal has been incredibly botched by the Biden administration, and because of that, a lot of moderates were upset at Biden. Even though a lot of moderates support withdrawal, they do not support this kind of withdrawal that Biden did, which was full of chaos. So because of that, his poll numbers have fell. But not only that, there is still COVID. COVID, which I'll talk in a separate video, has not gone away for Biden. He said he would be the COVID president in dropping COVID cases and as well as higher vaccination rates, but neither of those have quite happened yet. The COVID pandemic with the Delta variant has essentially ruined all of Biden's COVID recovery. We still have a pandemic with thousands of cases every single day, and this time there is no pandemic relief in the face of economic crisis. So with that, both of those factors combined together create a very narrow margin of approval / disapproval. And this is reflected not only through Rasmussen polls, which lean more Republican, lean more conservative, but also in other polls like YouGov and Ipsos. Both of them have pretty even approval and disapproval ratings. And if we compare them to previous presidencies, it reflects more of the previous presidents. Between at least at the turn of the century, Bush was around this level. Actually, Bush was higher than 48.5%. Obama was higher than 48.5%. Trump was the only president out of these three that was lower than 48.5%, and that is a worrying sign because what we've seen is that in order for Biden to win in midterm elections, you need around this much in terms of approval rating, 55%. This was the amount Bush had, actually 60% if you're considering that it's not going directly into January, around 60%, and that only gave Bush just a couple of extra seats in the House in the 2002 midterm elections, and that was because of 9/11. That unified the nation under Bush, and as a result, he was able to gain single-digit seats in the House in 2002. He bucked the trend in 2002, but it's unlikely that will ever happen again, just because of how polarized this nation is when it comes to dealing with crises. I mean, if this nation wasn't as polarized, Trump would have definitely won a second term. But when it comes to Biden, there's not really those kinds of disasters that seem to be imminent at this point, especially when compared to the gravity of the COVID-19 pandemic still happening in our nation. So Biden, unfortunately for him, his approval rating is probably going to go down and down from here, similar to how Obama has gone down and down through to his midterm elections, and that's a bad thing for 2022. And the reason why it's a bad thing is because Republicans already have an advantage when it comes to the House. If we look at this gerrymandering map right here, this is all the list of of states that Republicans and Democrats can gerrymander. And if we tally the gerrymandered seats together, then Democrats end up with 213 lean or safe seats. Meanwhile, the Republicans get 222 safe or lean seats. So it's an exact flip from what happened in the 2020 election, where the Democrats got 222 and the Republicans got 213. And this is by redistricting alone. This is on the more conservative side when it comes to redistricting. Republicans could probably gerrymander even more than what is stated here, but that would technically risk going into racial gerrymandering. But that's another thing that we've talked about in previous redistricting videos. But nonetheless, even with gerrymandering alone, in gerrymandering in states like Ohio, Indiana, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, these kinds of states that have Republican trifectas, it's completely possible for the Republicans to have a strong grip on the House even before the elections have started, before the election season has officially started. And the Republicans, not only that, have very very weak challengers they can go against. Weak not as in weak Democratic candidates, but weak in light of the circumstances. For example, Illinois' 17th district. Cherry Bustos already said she would retire from the U.S. House, and because of that, this seat will become much more risky. Now, Democrats do have an opportunity to gerrymander the seat to make it more Democratic for them, but we can look at other districts. There are way more districts that Democrats are much more vulnerable with. Texas's 28th district. If Republicans gerrymander that, then Henry Cuellar will be much more at risk. Vincent Gonzalez, already at risk. He'll most likely be gerrymandered into a Republican seat. Philemon Vela also would be vulnerable if Republicans are able to redistrict the seat. Lindsay Fletcher, another Democratic representative, is also at risk. Her seat can be redistricted into a more gerrymandered seat, but even without that, she has a very high chance of losing in the 2022 election, just because of how just based off special elections that we've seen in this past year, both state elections and local elections, we've seen that Republicans have done around 3% better than the 2020 election when it comes to non-jungle elections, and that's pretty much the percentage amount that Republicans need to go against Lizzie Fletcher come 2022, and that's not even taking into account redistricting. More seats are at risk. For example, Arizona's 1st district, Tom O'Halloran, also at risk. Arizona's 2nd district, somewhat at risk, not as much, but Arizona's 1st district also at risk. And then if you look at other seats, California, they have a bunch of seats where Democrats are at risk, especially in the LA area when it comes to Katie Porter's seat, and then and as well as the seats in the outer Los Angeles suburbs. In Georgia, they have 2 seats they can go against, Carolyn Bourdeaux and Lucy McBath. Both of those seats are very competitive for 2022, and most likely what Republicans will do is they will combine these seats into one so that Carolyn Bourdeaux and Lucy McBath have to go against each other, and then make that seat competitive for the Republican Party. So they could potentially knock out 2 Democrats by redistricting, and even without redistricting, they could certainly win and flip both of those seats for 2022. Another seat at risk, Abigail Spanberger. In Virginia, Democrats do not control redistricting in the state. That is done instead by a commission, and Abigail Spanberger might be screwed by the redistricting commission in Virginia. And if she is, that is the end of her, because she narrowly won in the 2020 election. It was a very close margin, around 1.8 percentage points separate the 2 candidates. That is incredibly close that is incredibly close for the 2 candidates, and that's a seat Republicans could certainly get. Conor Lamb seat also attainable because Pennsylvania does have a divided government, so the Democrats would be very likely to trade Conor Lamb's seat, and Conor Lamb, by the way, is not running in the seat in 2022, in exchange for making their Democratic seats much less competitive, because all of these seats right here, all of these two seats right here in the northeast Pennsylvania area, both of them are very competitive. And then if redistricting doesn't help these two candidates, both of these candidates can be at risk. In New Jersey, Tom Malinowski could be thrown under the bus by the Democratic Party. And during the redistricting session happening in New Jersey, Republicans and Democrats could use a bipartisan gerrymander where Democrats can get better seats with Josh Getheimer's seat, and as well as Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey's 11th district, and in exchange for Tom Kean being able to win in New Jersey's 7th district. So that is a very big race to watch. It's mainly a race of insiders. Whoever is able to dominate and redistricting for New Jersey will be able to win in New Jersey's 7th district. New York also has a lot of competitive seats. Luckily for Democrats, they're able to gerrymander those seats. But in Connecticut, there is also another competitive seat, which is Connecticut's 5th district in a redistricting. In a midterm session, Republicans could certainly get that seat. So they've already listed their list of candidates that they are trying to target. I believe it is 47 House Democrats that are targeted by the Republican Party. And you can see all of these seats are in pretty competitive areas. So with that, Republicans have a large swath of options that they can go for in order to win. In order to win in 2022, they can use redistricting, which by itself would give them the majority. They don't even have to do redistricting, though. They could potentially flip enough seats that they need in order to get to the majority, in order to get past 218 for control. They have a bunch of seats up that they can go for, like Nevada's 3rd district, Nevada's 4th district. Now, Democrats do control Nevada in terms of the redistricting process, but they can also go for Republican states like Kansas's 3rd district, Missouri's 5th district, Kentucky's 3rd district, Tennessee's 9th district. These are all seats that Republicans could try to get. In the 2022 election, Iowa's 3rd district, also in Republican territory. Indiana's 7th district, Indiana's 1st district, also gerrymanderable by the Republican Party. So if you remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seats from there, and then 6, and then a 7th seat from Tennessee, then you can see that the Republicans already have control in the U.S. House of Representatives. They would have 220 seats just in those Republican states alone. And the Republicans could probably gerrymander Ohio's 13th district to be more Republican. So that's 221 seats right there. And that's not even accounting for the fact that Republicans can shore up their competitive seats in Nebraska's 2nd district, in Utah's 4th district, in these districts that have previously gone to Democrats, but can go strongly for the Republican Party. And New Hampshire's another example. The Republicans control all 3 parts of the state government. So in New Hampshire, they can flip New Hampshire's 1st district to be Republican, and that would put one of these candidates at risk. So the point of this is to say that Republicans have a very, very, very broad list of options to target in 2022, and that's just because Biden's approval rating is going down and down. Right now, there is no signs of this approval rating going down and further down into the abyss, just because of the Afghanistan and COVID issue. And we'll talk more about COVID in a future video, because Biden is still facing challenges from that, and that is a worrying sign for the Democratic Party. But right now, the Democrats are not in a good place. They are like where Trump was in 2018, where the Democrats had a surge in in terms of anger, and as well as in Obama in 2010, where the Tea Party movement was able to effectively go against him. And now we're seeing in 2022, where a lot of moderates are getting tired that the Biden administration has not been able to conduct clean progress. So that's what's happening overall in the 2022 House elections. If we would give a percentage chance that Biden has in terms of keeping the House, I guess Nancy Pelosi still being in House leadership, it would be around 2% in terms of being able to win another term in the U.S. House of Representatives. It's just very low, considering that Democrats were not able to do well in the 2020 election, in the House election. So for the Democrats, they have barely any seats that they can spare, and the Republicans have a lot of seats that they can go for. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.